Hi, friends. In this series of videos, I'm going to share some of the work I do with a very, very special school district, the Beaufort Delta. This school district is near and dear to my heart. I've been working with them for just about 4 years now. Dear friends, colleagues, and the work is thorough. And as you can see, the Beaufort Delta is in a unique setting. It's one of Canada's most northerly school districts. And schools are very much spread across the Beaufort Delta. Regionally, a lot of them are fly-in only. Some of the schools are quite small. They serve small towns, small villages, small populations. And the Beaufort Delta is very special, partly because of the communities of which the Beaufort Delta serves. A large portion of the families are Indigenous. And with that come really amazing values, beliefs, identities, and stories that the school district has embraced in our planning, in our programming, in our commitments, and in our objectives and strategic plan. So, several years ago, the Beaufort Delta approached me to support them in adopting more of an inquiry stance. And very much looking at the curriculum and looking at the learning through a land-based, localized lens where we start with the identities of which we are serving. And teachers are planning to these identities through land-based experiences, inviting local learning guides into the classroom as often as possible. And I support the district in a myriad of ways. And one way that I support the district is through kind of a cohort model where we invite teachers to come be a part of a bit of a teaching community. Across the school year, we participate in workshops, conversations, collaborative inquiry, and we meet every 4 to 6 weeks online here. And at the end of the year, we engage in what we call a celebration of learning, a share out, where teachers from the Beaufort Delta who have been a part of these cohorts come together virtually and they share a little snippet of their learning journey. And every year, these shareouts are a highlight, the honesty, openness, reflection, vulnerability, and impact of these teachers thinking and planning on student learning, but also on their own learning. It's heartwarming, it's informative, and with their consent, I can share some of those recorded reflections with you here. So I hope you appreciate these, share outs. You're going to be introduced to some dear colleagues, Erica Thompson, Steve Dagar. They helped me facilitate this learning, being from the Beaufort Delta themselves. You'll hear us consolidate some of the teachers sharing, and you get to meet some amazing colleagues from the Beaufort Delta. You get to see into their classrooms. The shareouts are roughly 12 to 20 minutes long. So, get comfortable, sit in, get a cup of coffee or tea. And I invite you just to listen to their reflections, be inspired by the impact that they've helped facilitate, and listen to their own growth, their own learning. And I'm sure you're going to find it not just informative and inspiring, but also deeply helpful for your own practice. And I encourage you at the, outset of watching a video, consider what you may do in your own practice, having learned from these amazing colleagues, these students, their families, these communities, and how this learning might impact you to do something different, to let go of something, to embrace something, and to center something different in your practice. So enjoy. From my heart to yours, I'm really inspired by these teachers and their sharing and the learning that the students facilitated. And I'm sure you're going to enjoy it too.
All righty. I realized as Heather was presenting and doing amazing that I did a much more general overview.
Excellent. Again, it is not a one size fits all. It's really what you bring, right? It's really what sparked curiosity and engagement with you.
Awesome. And I love that you used the word spark because my first slide is it only takes a spark. Um, I realized through this as an educator that I already had the spark. I was really intimidated when I first started and first started looking at what inquiry was and what it involved and the different thinking routines. Um, and before I really understood it, I was intimidated by it. But as I realized that it's natural to tap into curiosity for learning, I realized that I already have a lot of things established that I was doing right. Um, some of my key realizations were that it builds on what the students already know, and it's fun to solve puzzles together. And you never know what direction it's going to go in, and the full picture isn't always there, and that is okay. Um, One of the things that I didn't love when I was in school was the rigidity, but I found inquiry to be so flexible. And it was something that all of the students in my classroom could participate in so openly. And as we went on, um, it built those relationships that I already thought were so established. It built them right up, and it really did spark more curiosity, more questions. The students were talking, they were excited. It was a really good process and realization for me that the learning can happen so organically when you're using inquiry. Awesome. And then so I have pictured, I have used a lot of the different routines. When I started, I found I was using the same ones over and over again just to get comfortable and get familiar. But as we went further and as it all started to develop, we started using so many. And I started with like see, think, wonder, and step in, step out. But then as we went on, I started using a variety, and I started adjusting them to fit our units visually. So like the Sicknick routine became the dog sled inquiry one, where the rays of the sun switched to be the leashes on the harnesses that were holding everything together, or the triangle became the layers of the earth, or the depths of the ocean, and it just made things a little bit more visual. The imagery was there for the kids, and as we did that, it really helped. I also incorporated a lot of movement, so I would put things on the walls and we would move around the room, and in that space learning became a lot more fun. And they were going group to group and like, oh, did you guys notice this? You guys didn't write this down. Like, oh, I liked your question, this made me think of this. And you could hear it, you could see it. And that was really exciting for me. So in those pictures, you can see one of my favorites is Stop and Jot. I love that. We do that for everything. The students were doing that all through our poetry unit that we were just doing. Um, I think one of the hardest things for me as an educator wanting to focus so hard on curriculum was letting students take the lead. I wanted to have control, but as I started to sort of relinquish that control, a lot of things became easier, which I really wasn't expecting. Um, so I'm not always okay with not having control. And so that was a really big area of learning for me. But some of the things that happened in that space were amazing. In the right corner of that slide is one of my favorite questions that came about. We were talking about the earth and its formation. We were reading Two Old Women. We were talking about survival and on the land skills. And the question that one of the students asked there was, does culture play a role in survival? And I loved that question. And it took us down a pathway that I wasn't planning to go down with them. But in the end, they decided that absolutely yes, culture does play a role in survival. And it was a really great learning for all of us. And it allowed them to teach me and to teach me a lot of stuff that I didn't know and I wasn't familiar with. And when we go out, they almost take a protection role when we're out on the land and stuff. So they really do step into that space of they're suddenly the teacher. And I really enjoyed that part of our process in our grade 7 classroom. Um, for my reflections, my quote, and I have it on my bulletin board in my room, is stepping back so students can step up. I really tried to remember that whenever I was planning and choosing different things that we were going to do. As we went on, I started doing a lot of cross-curricular things, and it allowed for us to stay in the space longer when we started linking all of our subjects to a main idea, which I also wasn't expecting, but we got really good at it towards the end. And I thought that our classroom was already a safe and welcoming space. I always worked really hard to build relationships with students, but it shifted and it became like our happy place. It was a place that students were excited to be right off the hop. As soon as they entered, it was like, what are we doing today? And they knew the process, they knew the structure, they knew what was gonna happen, but just not where the direction was going to take us. And I saw a renewed eagerness for learning, and it really helped me. And that was my buy-in. When I saw that, I was like, okay, they're 100% right. I see it. This is the way to go. I wish my whole school experience could have been inquiry driven. It makes such a big difference. Um, I am able to let go of control much better now than I did last year or even at the start of the year. I am trusting the process. I find that my everything, I think I've said it already, but everything got easier, lessons get easier, questions got easier, conversation flowed organically. And one of the things that I was not expecting was my classroom management became easier because those attitudes shifted, and the kids became, curious in a place where they really saw themselves. And so that was a reflection that I really liked. And then keeping the spark, I want to continue to let go. That has been my biggest challenge, but I put on the slide that in the end, it also became my biggest personal growth through the process. And I think it was something that the kids picked up on as well. And going ahead, I want to lean into student questions even more and let them drive planning. Um, and towards the end, when I became more comfortable and intentional, the integrating of subjects through inquiry became really natural. And I was finding that the students were making much deeper connections. Their questions were much more pointed and direct, and their curiosities were just flourishing. So I hope to start that a little bit sooner in the future. Um, and just being able to remain in the moment, because doing that allowed us to have more time. And I wish I knew that earlier. And then that last note, I have little fires everywhere because my brain loves inquiry. And that is it.
Amazing. Everyone, round of applause for Amy. My goodness. And we can't see Paige's proud smile. There any tears there, Paige? Look at that. Amazing. Yeah, right. Amy, I was just like really, really taken aback by your honest and candid and vulnerable reflections. I captured so many of them throughout your sharing, from start to finish, and obviously bookended here with this keeping the spark. And I just really want to honor and celebrate your honesty and your reflections just so candidly and openly for us all to appreciate and learn from. And one thing that I'd love to lift up is how you spoke to a sense of ease eventually. Things got easier, and you referenced a number of things, the flow, the classroom management, the ideas in the room, the questions in the room, and we often, we're really intentional with the early moves we make and the seeds we plant in the early days of a school year with students to hopefully get to a space of that type of ease and routine and relevance and meaning for everyone. And so, one thing that really stood out to me was that ease and how we want inquiry for students, but it's also really beneficial for us. Your reflections represent that, but also it sounded like, when you said your classroom is a happy place, it sounds like it's a happy place for you. And so that kind of co-regulation and community of space, I just really, makes me smile. My dimples, my cheeks hurt from smiling so much. So really appreciate those honest, candid reflections, Amy. Steve, how about you? Love to call on you and just share any insights or ahas or, how your heart felt in that sharing.
Well, yeah, I want to echo what you were saying in that, uh, you know, Amy, what I love so much is you said here, I want to let students questions uh, drive the learning even more. And I know that when I first started teaching X years ago, I was the driver of everything that happened in the classroom, and that's what I thought teaching was. It's how I was taught, and it's how I was taught to teach. And one of the things that we're learning on this journey of inquiry is relinquishing that control. And I heard you say that a couple of times. It's hard to relinquish that control as a teacher because we are control freaks, especially when we have X number of kids who need to do a thing, and sometimes they always don't want to do the thing. So we need to harness that control. Um, and so you really wanting to lean into allowing your students questioning to drive the instruction. I think that's huge. It's something that in my practice, when I work with teachers, it's on the forefront of my mind. Um, so kudos to you because it's not easy. It's really, really not easy because it's responsive planning and it's a little bit easier at times just to go down a path that we know where it's going. It's predictable. And when we allow students to take the wheel, it becomes a little bit more unpredictable. Uh, but through your presentation and Heather's presentation, like that question that the kids came up with, does culture play a role in survival? What a meaty question to have to unpack. And if we don't give the kids opportunities to ask those questions, I would never come up with that question. Probably not. Maybe I would. Maybe I would. Who knows? Um, but it's so authentic coming from the students. So I do want to lift you up for allowing yourself to go into the chaos of giving students opportunities to ask questions and then going down that road, even though the road might be bumpy or unpaved or you don't have a roadmap. So yeah, kudos to you. Well done, Amy.
Yeah. Yeah, Steve, thank you. And just to build upon that, Steve, we are hoping that through these discussions and these experiences and these resources that we're smoothing the road for everyone. Like it is uncertain. And we didn't learn this way in schooling. Heather, you were saying, or excuse me, Amy, you were saying like, gosh, I wish I had inquiry for me when I was, younger. And so certainly intentionally we're trying our best to smoothen the road for everyone. And we're not there yet. Like Amy, at one point you had to choke on the words that you were saying. You were saying, I think I do a better job of letting go. Like you really had a hard time getting the words out. Like it's really unlearning and relearning. And it's not easy work. And I applaud you for your openness. And I'm curious, friends, do we have any questions for Amy? Obviously we've invited you into the chat to throw your observations or connections. And is there anybody in the space that would like to ask Amy a question? And we're just going to let that hang if you would like to unmute. And I know, Amy, you're in the hot seat now. You're like, I don't know what they're going to ask me. Don't worry. We got your back. We got your corner. It's more a matter of just honoring the curiosity in the room, right? And if there's a wondering or a need for a connection to be made, we just want to lift it up.
I do have a quick question on the thinking routines, Amy, if you don't mind, unless anyone else has a quick question. You said that you, at the beginning, kind of dabbled in using the same routines over and over again, which is what I always tell teachers, like find, one, two, or three that work really well. So you said you had done the See, Think, Wonder, and there was another one that you had done, the Inside or Step Inside.
Yep.
Um, I have a two-part question. One, did you find that the more you did those, the kids became a little bit more comfortable or proficient at like doing the routine?
Absolutely, they did. I think the one thing with the thinking routines, it really does make your thinking visible. And then there's pattern in that, and there's routine in that, and there's structure in that. And as we did that over and over again, they got so comfortable with it. They really developed a lot of confidence. They knew what was coming. There was no guessing. They knew what the expectation was going to be, what the plan was going to evolve into. And so in that space, they definitely developed a lot of confidence.
So the second part of my question is, once your students became more comfortable in the handful of thinking routines that you were doing, you had said that you explored a little bit more, especially going into some of those place-based thinking routines. Were your students, after having opportunity to go into some of these more accessible thinking routines, were they willing to go on that journey with you and
Oh,
explore other types of thinking
absolutely.
routines?
Yeah,
Yeah.
they were, and that was really exciting for me, and it helped me with my teaching too. Once they became more comfortable, they became more curious. And so as we started using thinking routines that were more in depth and had more parts, they had the confidence to step into that space. And even though we were using thinking routines that might have had more parts, some days I was scaffolding them so that, it was like a to be continued moment.
Mm.
It didn't all just happen right then, right there. We would develop, one part really well before we went into the next part. And then over time, as we used the same one, like the triangle, whatever it was, if it was the ocean, if it was the layers of the earth, we were able to be curious about all the different sections at different times because sometimes that's how our brains work and it's up there. And we were just, following whatever the pathway was in the end. And there was never a time that we didn't cover what I was intending to cover for the curriculum, which I think was probably my biggest fear. Like I wanted to make sure I was checking all those boxes, but letting the students lead, um, all of their competencies were developing. I didn't need to be in control of that. And I think that was my biggest growth was that realization that I can let go, we can do this, trusting the kids and trusting the process. And they definitely did not let me down. It was amazing.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Could you stop sharing your screen, Paige and Amy, if you don't mind? Um, Eric, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you if you wanted to add any insights to Amy's sharing.
Only appreciation. I really think that the cross-curricular piece of that you alluded to and the way in which you were able to kind of take an umbrella concept and then extend it into each of the like different curriculums areas, like that's something that is so tricky and something that I think, teachers having like the visuals of how that looks, how you got there, like that would be super duper helpful to get that like story out there. And just, even just the a few documentation pieces around that, like how a concept started in one subject and then expanded to another. And so I really appreciated just the way that you kind of charted that little course for us and that idea of starting from confidence. Really, that's what resonated with me the whole time is that, you with comfort and confidence and then saw what you could do. And that's kind
Yeah.
of like a two-way street, like both for them and for you, and then saw what you could do next, and then saw what you could do next, and then saw where it could go, right? So you're really dreaming and innovating together, and I think that's quite beautiful. Um, yeah, I don't want to like hold us up, but I do want to just make that known. I did just text Paige a little, hey, can you kind of mine Amy's expertise there, where she goes to kind of like make that a little bit visible for us, right? Because I think that's really helpful. I think that's a really hard skill, right? So thank you for sharing that piece.
Yeah. And Paige, extra homework, because I can't text you like Erica just texted you. But Paige, extra homework is I would love to see photos of how you adapted the question triangle. Amy, you had said that at one point you use it to be the layers of the earth or the layers of the ocean. And gosh, we know that when it's culturally symbolic or connected or centered, it really is an entry point right away in most cases. And so, just selfishly, like I want teachers to see how they could be nimble with using these routines to be responsive with their students. So, in my mind, I see maybe, showing all three, the traditional question triangle, the earthy one, and the oceany one. I think that would be really slick. And then lastly, friends, before we transition to our next speaker, we often talk about inquiry for kids, and what's happening is inquiry for you all.
Mhm.
And you've done this little what we call a collaborative inquiry. You either have a critical friend sitting beside you, or you've had us as a community supporting you. And when we see that kind of thing happen, that's when we see lasting shift in teacher practice. It's not something we do to kids, it's something we are actively experiencing. And both Heather and Amy have represented that so far. And there's a great body of work that talks about that. So this is one of Ron Richards' work. It's called Cultures of Thinking in Action. It's how do we create a thinking culture? And guess what? Amy and Heather have shown us that they've embodied thoughtful professionals. And I know that sounds trite, but this is when we talk about sustained change for our students and for our practice. Another one is spirals of inquiry. We did not use Linda and Judy's work to create this framework that we've engaged in. Spirals of inquiry is a process that schools and teachers go through to engage in their own personal inquiries. We haven't used that, right, Erica, in our design. But again, I just want to lift up like the global research that says that what you're doing is powerful. Although we're hearing it now, I just want to make this zoom out moment where what we're doing has, great evidence-based, research attached to it.